Hello health champions! Today I want to talk about some foods that are usually promoted as the very healthy foods that we should eat a lot of, but especially in some people they can actually cause health problems and they can be the very foods that they need to avoid if they want to at all be able to recover from their conditions. Coming right up. Hey, I'm Dr. Ekberg. I'm a holistic doctor and a former Olympic decathlete. And if you want to truly master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything. I'm going to give you my top 10 list of healthy foods that could actually be killing you. But I want to let you know it's a useless list. And why do I say that? Because it's useless unless you know exactly why the foods are on there. So here's the list. For those people who just want the list, now you can take that and you can go and compare it to other useless lists and continue to be more and more confused. All right? No, don't do that. Stay with me so that you can start understanding, because then if you know why these foods do what they do for some people, then you can also understand why other foods that are similar might be doing similar things, and you can help other people understand this as well. In talking about this, I also want to dig a little deeper into why some people don't get better when some people do. So a lot of people get better just by working on insulin resistance. They lose weight, their aches and pains, their arthritis, their brain fog goes away. But then there's some people who do all the same things and they might even lose the weight and reverse their insulin, but they still don't feel so good. What's going on here? So we're going to talk about how to fix the other 20%. And I think by understanding this, we might actually be able to reverse 90% of the other issues for the rest of the 20% of people. And most of what's going on when you're not getting better, when it seems tough, is that there's an allergy or a sensitivity or an intolerance of some kind. It's your body is reacting. You're having an immune response. Whenever you put something in your body, it doesn't do well. It doesn't blend well. There's a reaction. And now it's going to start manifesting in a gut flora imbalance, and small intestine bacterial overgrowth, or a leaky gut. And then down the road, you might even get some autoimmunity. Another thing I want to point out is that the foods we're talking about is not bad for everybody. They're not the worst foods in the world. They're not like beer and donuts and fast food, all right? These are healthy for a lot of people, or at least moderately healthy for a lot of people. But we're going to talk about why they hurt some people. So at the core of these issues is inflammation and sensitivities and leaky gut. And then once you have leaky gut, now you get more sensitivities, because particles that are supposed to be too big to get through the intestinal lining, now they slip through and you have more immune responses and more inflammation. So now all these three feed each other, and if this is allowed to go on for a while, now you also have some autoimmunity. You start developing chronic autoimmune responses, and now all four of these variables start to feed each other. And that's why it's so difficult to get out of this. That's why so many people, they try for months or years to do all the right things, but it's so frustrating because they feel really stuck. So how do so many people get into this whole mess? Well, it often starts with antibiotics or anti-inflammatory drugs that are very irritating on the intestinal lining. There's also, of course, a genetic predisposition, and stress is hugely influential, because when you stress, you turn off your parasympathetic nervous system, you don't digest well, and you don't heal well. And when you don't heal, that includes the leaky gut, of course. We have to put sugar on this list as well of causes, because sugar promotes inflammation, it promotes insulin resistance, it upsets the balance of your bacteria in the gut, and the list goes on and on. And then we're going to go into a little bit more detail today on something called lectins, because these can also wreak havoc and promote all of these factors. Number 10 on the list of healthy foods that might kill you is vegetable oil. And I put quotation marks on vegetable oils because there is no such thing. The soybean oil is actually a legume, it's a bean. Corn oil is from a grain, and canola oil is from a seed. None of these are vegetable oils, but what they do is they promote them as healthy, because we've all been told so many times that eat more fruits and vegetables, eat more fruits and vegetables. So if something is a vegetable or from a vegetable, that's got to be good for you, right? So because they're not vegetables, all of these food types actually contain lectins. Now, in this case, they don't contain a whole lot because the oil is mostly the fat portion. They only have trace amounts of protein in there, but if you're sensitive, then that can still be an issue. The really big deal about why these are so bad, except that they're processed and basically dead, empty calories, is that most of the fat is omega-6s. And in the body, we have omega-3s, which are anti-inflammatory. We have omega-6s, which are pro-inflammatory. And the closer we have that ratio to 1:1, the better things work. The easier it is for the body to balance inflammation. But with all of the foods that we have and the meat that we have that's grain-fed, we're pushing the omega-6 balance up. So today, in a lot of people, we have a 20:1 ratio. So we're pushing things toward pro-inflammation. And the more of these oils we eat, the further we push that out of balance. In order to really understand why these foods are on the list and why they're ranked the way they are, we're going to look at all the different factors of how do they promote insulin resistance? Do they promote inflammation? How common is this food as an allergy? Do a lot of people react to it? Does it promote leaky gut and autoimmunity? And is it toxic in itself? Is it such a potent toxin that it fits into a receptor or interfere with a metabolic pathway or a signal pathway? So the biggest problem with vegetable oils is inflammation. They get a big red X because they promote inflammation through those omega-6s. Then they get a tiny little X because they don't have a lot of lectins, but just even a trace amount of lectins could promote allergies, leaky gut, and autoimmunity in some sensitive people. It's not really toxic per se. I wouldn't call it a poison. It's just really bad in general. Then what about avocado oil and olive oil? Are they vegetable oils? No. Avocado and olive are fruits. And like I mentioned initially, there is actually, as far as I've been able to find, there is no such thing as a vegetable oil. Number 9 is a shocker to most people, but bear with me, you don't have to stop eating these things. You just need to understand which ones to eat. Meat and fish and poultry can be bad depending on what we feed these guys, all right? Because if they're grain-fed, then they're going to have omega-6s in them. They're going to have some lectins in their meat. So whatever they ate, you eat, all right? And lectins, if we dig a little bit deeper, lectins are known as anti-nutrients. That means they interfere with the absorption of nutrients. Even if you eat other foods alongside that are perfectly fine, you still can't absorb the nutrients properly from those. Lectins can fit into insulin receptors and either act as insulin or block insulin. So it has the potential of promoting insulin resistance, of increasing blood sugar, and also of increasing weight gain and preventing fat loss. These lectins are a form of sticky proteins, and they stick to carbohydrates. So on your cell surfaces, for example, in your gut lining and in your blood vessels, there's a protective layer where there's some little antennas of carbohydrate portions sticking out. And these lectins, they attach and they make these cell surfaces deteriorate. So now, if that happens on the gut lining, it very strongly promotes leaky gut, and in the blood vessels, it can promote atherosclerosis or heart disease. And the assessment of mechanisms for this is going to be exactly the same as the vegetable oils, because they're only getting this stuff because they're eating the same things that they made the vegetable oils from. But this is a little bit worse because the oil is mostly the lipid portion, but lectins, which are proteins, you're going to get more of them because you're eating something that contains a lot of protein. It's not, they haven't refined and removed the protein. But here's the good news. Like I said, it only is bad depending on what they feed them. So you can still eat these as long as you eat wild-caught fish and you eat grass-fed meat and you eat poultry and eggs that have been raised without eating grain and corn and soy and so forth. Number 8 on the list is alcohol. And alcohol is often promoted as healthy because it's very relaxing. They have associated it with lower cholesterol and lower heart disease. And red wine, for example, contains something called resveratrol that has been found to be very beneficial. But there's not really enough resveratrol in there to make any difference unless you drink like 100 bottles a day, which I wouldn't recommend. When we look at what alcohol causes, it's not really a promoter of insulin resistance, but when we go down the list here, it primarily is promoting leaky gut. It increases intestinal permeability, and in doing that, it can promote inflammation and allergies and autoimmunity. Even if you're not really allergic to alcohol, that's very, very rare, but it can increase other allergies. It can increase how prone you are to get other allergies. And alcohol is a toxin, both to the liver and the brain. But it is sort of like sugar and fructose. It's a natural molecule, so it's dose dependent. The dose makes the poison. Number 7 is something called nightshades. And these are foods that, for most people, they don't really create a problem. And that goes for a lot of the things we're talking about today, that these are not bad for everybody. They're a little bit bad for everybody, but not bad enough to really be a big deal. But for some people, they're a deal breaker, all right? And nightshades, they are the good veggies. A lot of these are low carb. They're loaded with vitamins and other good things, but they're also loaded with lectins, especially in the skin and in the seeds. So if you peel them and de-seed them and cook them, now you're going to reduce the lectins. And if you pressure cook them, then they're okay because you're going to pretty much eliminate all the lectins. Some of the very popular foods with lectins are potatoes, tomatoes, bell peppers, and eggplant. And these are all in a family called nightshades. So what do these nightshades cause? They can promote insulin resistance a little bit. First of all, depending on how much starch is in there, like potatoes have a lot of starch, but the others don't. They can still indirectly promote insulin resistance through the lectins though, because they can fit into the insulin receptors. The rest of them, they're pretty strong on inflammation, allergy, leaky gut, and autoimmunity if you're sensitive, right? They create a little bit of a problem in everybody, but it's like if you have a strong immune system, if you have strong barriers, then these things may never become an issue. So that's where you kind of want to try it out. If you're suspecting that you have some issues, then give it a shot and see what happens. If you're feeling a whole lot better, then there's a good chance there's a problem. Number 6 is dried fruit, very often promoted as super healthy. Who hasn't heard that? Oh, you need to get a trail mix, quick energy, it's all super good for you. And things like yogurt raisins, right? Well, raisins to start with is 66% sugar and 77% net carbs. But if that wasn't enough, they take the raisin and now they coat it with sugar, right? That's not enough sugar. Let's add some more sugar. And while we're at it, let's coat it with some artificial flavor and some artificial color and some synthetic yogurt powder, because if we call it yogurt, then it's got to be a health food, right? Right. So don't fall for it. Know that this is just pure sugar. So it strongly promotes insulin resistance because all of this sugar, it's not glucose. It's not like a potato. It is sugar, which means it's 50% glucose and 50% fructose for the most part. There's some variation in different fruits, but pretty much. And therefore it's going to promote inflammation. Allergies, not a big deal. There's not a whole lot of people that are allergic to it. Not so much leaky gut and autoimmunity. Is it toxic? Well, just because of the fructose, it is actually toxic. Fructose is toxic to the liver, and that's why sugar is so devastating for the liver and why it promotes insulin resistance and fatty liver so much. Number 5 good food that kills you is agave syrup. I get so many questions in the clinic about this. Everyone comes in and, oh, I've been told this is the good thing and my doctor said this is the one to do because it has a low glycemic index and it has been cleared as okay for type 2 diabetics. And this is a travesty, it's a tragedy, because agave syrup is 60 to 90% fructose. Okay? Sugar is bad enough, it's 50-50. High fructose corn syrup is like 55% fructose and 45% glucose. This is 60 to 90% fructose. This is high fructose corn syrup on steroids. So even though it's a little bit more natural product, it might have remained a little bit of a mineral or a vitamin in there, it's not a source of nutrients, but what it is, it's high fructose corn syrup on steroids. So the pattern is going to be the same as the dried fruit, but just a little bit more because it's all about the sugar hurting the liver, promoting inflammation and insulin resistance. And I had to laugh when I looked at the label of this bottle. It said crafted for bartenders. So they're supposed to mix drinks with this stuff. And basically what they're saying is, if we don't get to kill your liver with the alcohol, then let's make sure that we get a second shot at it with this high fructose syrup. Number 4 on the list is beans and legumes. Now, a lot of people around the world are eating this as a staple. How bad can it be? Well, for some people it is devastating. We're talking soy and peanuts are 2 of the most common types of beans and legumes. They're high in starch, they're very high in lectins, and when it comes to being an allergen, they're extremely common. In my clinic, we'll go through the top 5 here, but soy and peanuts are number 4 and number 5 of the most common allergens and sensitivities that we find. So it upsets a lot of people. Soybeans especially are very, very hard to digest. And when we look at the mechanisms, do they promote insulin resistance? Yes, a little bit, but the starch is mostly glucose. It doesn't really have a whole lot of sugar. But inflammation, allergy, leaky gut, autoimmune is pretty strong. So all in all, beans and legumes, if you can handle them, fine, eat it in moderation, but if you suspect something, then stay away and see what happens. Item number 3 on the list is a lot of people's favorite vegetable, except it's not a vegetable, it is a grain. It is very high in starch, very high in sugar. It's very high in lectins, and in my office I would say that it's the third most common allergen. It's a tremendously common allergen, and the problem is corn is in everything. Even if you don't eat the corn on the cob, you have cornstarch and corn syrup in just about every processed food there is. It is very difficult to digest, and as if that wasn't bad enough, virtually all the corn you can find today is genetically modified. How does it fare over here? Well, it promotes insulin resistance and inflammation. It's a very, very common allergen, like we said. It promotes leaky gut and autoimmunity as well. Food number 2, skim milk. Now, so many commercials that gut milk, and we're told that if kids don't get the milk, they are not going to get any calcium, and all these myths are out there. So one of the problems with skim milk that makes it a lot worse than whole milk is that there is no fat to buffer the sugar. That skim milk has 60% of the calories come from sugar, from the lactose in there. So it's basically a sugar food. It's not as bad as sucrose, because that's glucose and fructose. Lactose, which is in milk, doesn't have the fructose, but it's still a sugar. It still raises blood sugar. Pasteurization is a problem because it changes the properties. It makes it much more difficult to digest. A lot of the enzymes and bacteria that are native to the milk, they help us digest it. When we pasteurize it, we destroy those. We also denature some of the proteins in the milk with the heat. They don't look the same to our enzymes afterwards. And when we homogenize it, we break down the fat into much, much tinier particles, so it actually irritates that gut lining as well. It is the second most common allergen. I have virtually no people coming into the office who are not sensitive to milk. So it doesn't promote insulin resistance a whole lot, but it is a strong promoter of all the others because it is such a common allergen. Allergen create inflammation. It's like you're lighting a spark and a fire in the body when you have it. And as if milk isn't bad enough, then let me blow up this picture for you. And here is your recommended serving. You serve it with sugar and sugar. And the number one worst of the healthy foods is wheat. It encompasses all of the things that make grains problematic. And whole grains are actually worse in some regards because even though they contain more nutrients, they have about the same blood sugar response and they contain much more of the lectins. So wheat is very high in starch, it is very high in lectins, and it's the number one allergen that I find in my office. There are so many people, even though the celiac disease people are the ones who sort of set on fire every time they eat it, there are so many people that have lesser sensitivities to wheat that they don't really know about. Is it a GMO? Not technically, because by the time around in the 1980s, when wheat was hybridized, they didn't have the GMO technology. They couldn't do sophisticated gene splicing, but they radiated it and bombarded it and changed it in so many different ways that in a lot of ways it's worse than a GMO. It is not even close to what wheat used to be thousands of years ago. And it is also quite toxic because most of it is raised with something called glyphosate or other pesticides. And how does it look over here? Well, it is strongly promoting insulin resistance and inflammation. Like I said, it's the number one allergy that I see. It promotes leaky gut and autoimmunity, and it's not a poison in itself, but through the glyphosate and all the chemicals used to raise it, it can be quite toxic as well. So here's the list of food from 1 to 10, but now you know why the foods are on the list and why they're ranked that way. And they may not be ranked that way for everybody. This is just a suggestion. You can take your understanding and start applying it. Just like we have an immune system, different people have a different ability to protect themselves from the lectins and from these allergens. So it's not like these foods are terrible for everybody. They're probably a little bit bad for everybody. They put a little bit of stress on the body, but if your defenses are strong enough, you may not have a big issue with them. However, if you have some issues that haven't resolved, then why not give it a try? Cut some of this out for 30 days and see what happens. Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to learn more about how the body really works and how to get truly healthy, I think that you'd really enjoy that video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.